In this dynamics tutorial, we're going to take a look at bounce and friction. So the way bounce works in Cinema 4D is a little bit confusing. So I'm just going to start by creating a cube. And I'm going to create a sphere. And I'm going to give these both a rigid body tag. The cube I'm going to turn off dynamic, so it's a static object. Play it back and we get a little bounce. So if we go to the collision tab, we have this bounce setting, which is by default set to 50%. So the way bounce is supposed to work in theory is if I set both the bounce of the sphere and the cube, because there's always two objects in a collision. So if these both have a bounce value of 100%, in theory, this ball should never lose kinetic energy. It should just keep bouncing forever. But the way it works in Cinema 4D can be a little bit different due to lots of variables in the simulation calculations. But that's basically what this is supposed to mean. That's what 100% is supposed to mean. And you can go beyond 100%. So basically the physically accurate values are between 0 and 100, and then anything beyond that is kind of unpredictable and abstract. Another thing to note is, even if the ball has a bounce of 1000% and the cube has a bounce of 0, the cube is always going to take over. So basically the lower end always kind of leads. So you would think that it takes an average between 1000% and 0, so the bounce would be 500. But basically, if a value is very low, that leads the simulation. So next, I'm just going to delete the sphere and I'm going to take a look at friction. I'm going to turn this cube into a seesaw, and I'm just going to add some keyframe animation onto it. I'm going to tilt it down. And because dynamic is set to off, it's a static object, which means we can use keyframe animation and still simulate dynamics. I'm going to create a cube and just place it slightly above the seesaw. Call this seesaw. I'm going to give the cube a rigid body tag. That's my shortcut. So by default, friction is set to 30%. So if this cube has 0 friction, it's going to start sliding pretty much immediately. The friction of the seesaw is coming into play. So if I set that to 0 as well, we get a similar result. If I set both frictions to 99%, the cube is basically going to take a lot longer to fall down, as you can see. It takes quite a bit for it to fall down. So I'm just going to set friction to something extreme, 1000%, see what happens. And it still seems to be, it's not that different to the 99% value. It's pretty similar. That's why dynamics in Cinema 4D can be a bit confusing, because you would expect a value of 1000% to be dramatically different, but it's actually not that much different to 99%. And the same applies to the bounce. It can be quite difficult to predict what something's going to do. One thing to point out with friction is, though, if you really want accurate friction, you should set the objects to moving mesh, because basically the automatic shape has quite a few bugs in it, and moving mesh is just calculated more accurately. So that's a quick, simple introduction to bounce and friction. If you found this useful, please share it, and thanks for watching.